The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy, clinking glasses, muted laughter, the soft scrape of silverware against porcelain. Sarah Mitchell sat alone at table 14, watching couples lean across candlelight, their faces glowing with intimacy she'd almost forgotten existed. Her phone screen read 7:43 p.m. He was 43 minutes late. She smoothed the fabric of her emerald dress, the one her sister insisted made her eyes sparkle, and wondered why she'd bothered. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her leap back into a world that had moved on without her for 3 long years. Instead, she was just another woman sitting alone, pretending the pitying glances from the waitstaff didn't sting. Sarah had almost decided to leave, had mentally calculated the tip for her untouched glass of wine, had rehearsed the graceful exit she'd make, when 2 small figures appeared at her table, twin girls no older than 5, with matching yellow sundresses and wild, brown curls that refused to be tamed by their butterfly clips. They stood side by side, hands clasped together, their eyes wide with the kind of nervousness children wear when delivering important messages. "My daddy's sorry he's late," they said in perfect unison, as if they'd practiced the line 100 times. Sarah blinked, her prepared speech about leaving dissolving on her tongue. She looked past them, expecting to see a harried father rushing through the restaurant door, but saw only the regular Friday crowd. The girls remained planted before her, small sentinels waiting for a response. "I'm sorry, sweethearts," Sarah said gently, leaning forward. "I think you might have the wrong table." The girl on the left, she had a small freckle on her nose, shook her head with the absolute certainty only children possess. "Table 14, the pretty lady in the green dress." "That's what Daddy said." Sarah's heart did a strange flutter. Mark, her blind date, arranged by well-meaning friends who insisted it was time, had known what she'd be wearing. She'd texted him that detail yesterday, along with her usual self-deprecating joke about hoping she didn't look like a Christmas ornament. But these children, this she hadn't prepared for. "Is your daddy Mark?" Sarah asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Both girls nodded enthusiastically. The one on the right, who had a band-aid on her elbow, thrust a slightly crumpled piece of paper towards Sarah. "He wrote you a note. We're not supposed to read other people's private stuff, but Emma peeked anyway." "Did not." Emma, the freckled one, protested. "Did too. You said it was romantic." Sarah took the note with trembling fingers, unfolding it while the girls bickered with the comfortable rhythm of siblings who'd had this same argument countless times. The handwriting was hurried, desperate even, slanting across the page in dark ink. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm at Children's Memorial Hospital. My ex-wife was supposed to have the girls tonight, but she was in a car accident an hour ago. She's going to be okay, but there's no one else. I couldn't leave them, couldn't bring them to the ER, couldn't do anything but try to keep them calm. I'm a coward for sending them to explain. You have every right to leave, but if you're still there when I read this sentence in my head, wondering if you'll understand. Thank you. Mark." The words blurred as Sarah read them twice, 3 times. Around her, the restaurant continued its Friday night symphony, oblivious to the small earthquake happening at table 14. She looked up at the 2 girls watching her with identical expressions of hope mixed with the resigned sadness of children who'd learned too early that adults' plans often fell apart. "Your mom's going to be okay?" Sarah asked softly. "Daddy said she broke her arm and has to stay overnight for watching." The quiet one with the band-aid said, "I'm Lily, by the way." "That's Emma. We're 5.5. 5 3/4, Emma corrected. "That's almost 6. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking but opening, like a window sealed shut for too long, finally letting in light. 3 years ago she'd been planning a different life. She and James had been looking at houses with good school districts, talking about names, imagining the shape of their future. Then came the diagnosis, his, not hers, and 2 years of watching him slip away despite every prayer, every treatment, every desperate bargain she'd tried to make, with a universe that didn't negotiate. When he died, her friends had surrounded her with casseroles and sympathy. then slowly returned to their lives, their dinner parties, their ordinary complaints about spouses who left dishes in the sink. They meant well, pushing her toward this blind date, insisting she couldn't mourn forever. They didn't understand she wasn't mourning anymore. She'd just forgotten how to begin again. But here were these two little girls, sent as messengers by a man who was probably terrified she'd disappear, trying so hard to do what their daddy asked. Here was life, messy and complicated, and refusing to follow anyone's script. "Well," Sarah said, making a decision that felt both crazy and absolutely right. "I don't know about you two, but I'm starving. Should we order some dinner while we wait for your daddy?" The transformation in their faces was instantaneous. Relief, surprise and pure joy competing for dominance. Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? You're not leaving?" "Really," Sarah confirmed, waving down a passing waiter. "But I need to know something important first. What's your policy on sharing mozzarella sticks?" What followed was the strangest, most wonderful dinner Sarah had experienced in years. Lily, who'd seemed quiet at first, opened up when talking about her bug collection, describing in minute detail the difference between a ladybug and an Asian lady beetle. Emma was pure theatrical energy, narrating an elaborate story about their cat, Mr. Whiskers, who she insisted could predict the weather by the direction his tail pointed. They argued over whether chocolate or vanilla was superior, whether unicorns or dragons would win in a battle, and if it was fair that they had to go to bed at 8:30, when clearly they were mature enough to stay up until 9. Sarah found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. She wiped pizza sauce from Lily's chin, refereed the unicorn debate, and learned that their father was a high school English teacher who did silly voices when reading bedtime stories and made pancakes shaped like animals every Sunday. "Daddy's been sad," Emma announced suddenly. With the brutal honesty children deploy like hand grenades, ever since Mommy moved to her new apartment. "Emma!" Lily hissed. "That's private information." "But it's true." He smiles on the outside, but not in his eyes. "You know that thing grown-ups do?" Sarah knew exactly that thing. She'd done it herself for 2 years, perfecting the art of seeming okay. "Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure out how to be happy again," she said carefully, "even when they want to be." "Is that why you looked sad when we walked up?" Lily asked. "The waiting alone kind of sad?" Before Sarah could answer, before she could figure out how to answer, a man burst through the restaurant entrance. He was tall, slightly disheveled, with the same wild brown curls as his daughters, and eyes that found them immediately, flooding with relief. Mark's gaze swept from his daughters to Sarah, and in that moment she saw everything: the exhaustion, the fear, the apology, and underneath it all, something tender and uncertain. He rushed to the table, slightly out of breath. "Girls, you were supposed to give her the note and come right back to the car. I was parked out front. I was watching through the window. I was only supposed to be gone 5 minutes." He finally looked directly at Sarah. "I'm so sorry. This is literally the worst first impression in the history of first impressions. I completely understand if you want nothing to do with—" "Sit down, Mark," Sarah interrupted gently. "Your mozzarella sticks are getting cold." He stared at her, speechless. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, she stayed. And she's funny. And she knows about lady beetles. And she said unicorns could possibly beat dragons, if they had the element of surprise." Mark sank into the chair across from Sarah, looking like a man who'd been braced for rejection and couldn't quite process its absence. "You stayed. They're excellent ambassadors," Sarah said, nodding at the girls who were now fighting over the last mozzarella stick with exaggerated grimaces. "Very persuasive. I had this whole plan," Mark said, running a hand through his hair. "I was going to be charming and punctual and not mention my complicated life until at least the 3rd date, as per the divorced dad dating manual. Instead, I sent my 5-year-olds as envoys, and you've seen every messy corner of my existence before we've even said hello properly." Sarah looked at this exhausted, embarrassed man and his 2 spectacular daughters, and felt something she'd thought died with James, the flutter of possibility. Hello, Mark. I'm Sarah, and my life is pretty messy too, if we're being honest. I wasn't even sure I could do this tonight. I almost left before your girl showed up. Why didn't you? He asked quietly. She glanced at Lily and Emma, now making elaborate plans involving the dessert menu, and thought about the conversation she'd had with James near the end, when he'd held her hand with what little strength remained and made her promise she wouldn't stop living. Because sometimes the best moments come from the plans that fall apart, she said. And because two very brave girls delivered a very honest note from their dad. Mark's smile finally reached his eyes. Emma was right. There was a difference, and in that moment, Sarah understood that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or forcing yourself back into the person you used to be. It was about staying at the table even when things didn't go according to script. It was about saying yes to the messy, complicated, beautiful possibility that life might surprise you again. So, Mark said, his voice lighter, since we've already covered family drama, hospital emergencies, and my children's entire personalities, what should we talk about for our first date? Sarah laughed, really laughed, while Emma declared they should definitely order the chocolate lava cake, and Lily wondered if the restaurant had any educational materials about local insects. The evening hadn't been anything like what either of them planned, but as Sarah would tell her sister later, the best love stories never are. They're written by 5-year-old messengers in butterfly clips, by people brave enough to send honest notes, and by those courageous enough to stay at empty tables until they become full. The blind date hadn't been empty after all. It had just been waiting for exactly the right moment to begin.